Hi, this video is going to show you how to install BigBlueButton and walk you through all the steps to set up your own BigBlueButton server. Just before we do that, a bit of background. If you've not heard of BigBlueButton before, it's an open source web conferencing system. It originated at Carleton University in 2007. It's localized into over 25 languages by a very active community. The GitHub project is quite active as well, over 14,000 commits, and at the time of this video, over about 3,200 forks. Currently, we have over 2,300 members on our mailing list, and as BigBlueButton is designed for online learning, it has deep integrations with many of the popular learning management systems, including Canvas, Docebo, Genzabar, Moodle, Sakai, Schoology, Talent LMS, and if you have others, you can probably integrate with learning tools interoperability. So for real-time collaboration, online teaching, BigBlueButton provides sharing of audio, video, slides, chat, desktop polls, emoticons, breakout rooms, and we really care about accessibility as well. So there's support for JAWS, a screen reader, and live closed captioning. You can use BigBlueButton in many ways. Here's an example of just using it for more group collaboration. And of course, we use BigBlueButton to develop BigBlueButton. Here's a recent developer meeting where we had 15 developers just sharing their webcams. As a background, you can find lots of information on the project at bigbluebutton.org. Okay, so what this video will cover, we'll set up a Ubuntu 16.04 server, 64-bit. We'll use DigitalOcean for it. We'll install the 1.1 currently in beta. By the time you watch this video, it probably is released. We'll assign a hostname to it, and we'll configure it for SSL. Okay, let's get started. All right, we're ready to begin installation of BigBlueButton. I have the 4 websites that were referenced in the previous document. This is the documentation for BigBlueButton. I will be setting up a Ubuntu 16.04 server on DigitalOcean. You can use any hosting provider you want. We have a domain name ready for the server. Again, I'm using GoDaddy, but you can use your own domain name registrar. And we'll be using Let's Encrypt to create an SSL certificate. So I'm going to go to the install and scroll down. Now, I'm actually going to install the 1.1 beta. When you're watching this video, this will probably be the install steps you go to as we move the beta into these steps. But for now, I'll just click on the link 1.1 beta. Okay, so we're going to go through the instructions step by step. So first thing we need is Ubuntu 16.04 server. Okay, let's create a droplet. And this is what DigitalOcean calls its servers. Ubuntu 16.04, give it 4 gigabytes of memory, which is the minimum requirement. Set it up in Toronto, and we'll call it new BigBlueButton. Okay, let's create it. Okay, while it's creating it, DigitalOcean is provisioning the server. We're going to get the IP address, and we're going to log into it. I have a console here ready to go, and because I didn't use a public key, I'll get an email message with the password for the server. So we'll use that to install. So there's the IP address. Okay, let's go SSH root at, and I'm just going to get the password from my email. Okay, yes, enter the password, and it's going to want me to change the password, so I'll enter the temporary one. And I'll give it a new password. Great. Okay. Let's go back to the install steps. So DigitalOcean is good. It gives the server a single IP address. There it is. And it has the ports open up by default, so there's no firewall we have to configure. And the server has about 40 gig of disk space, which is fine here for testing. And there's lots of bandwidth to it. Okay, I kind of know the server meets the other checks, but we're going to go through these just to make sure. You should do the same on your server as well. So let's see, do we have the locale, US English? Yes, that's needed for some of the install scripts which actually do string matching. Okay, let's see, is this a 64-bit server? Yes. Make sure the release is Ubuntu 16.04. Looks good. Okay, and have a hostname and SSL certificate ready? We do. Okay, so before installing, we've got the server set up. It's a clean server, nothing's running on it before. Got a host name, and we'll create the SSL certificate as part of the installation steps. All right, let's get going. So first thing is we're going to update the server, and it's asking to make sure that there's multiverse installed. Again, it's good to check. Yep, it's there in the sources. This is going to be required for some of the packages that BigBlueButton depends upon. Next, are we installing BigBlueButton on a virtual server? Yes. So to give Tomcat and some other components more entropy, we're going to install this package called Havage, which is a simple entropy daemon. That'll make sure Tomcat will start up fairly quickly. Okay. And now let's just update our server to make sure it has all the latest packages. Okay. So a few things to install. You'll likely have this as well. Even when you get a brand new server from a hosting provider, it probably doesn't have the absolute latest packages. So let's just make sure we're completely up to date. We'll do the apt-get update, apt-get dist upgrade. Okay, it's finished, and it actually updated the kernel, so I'm going to do a reboot. And the server is going to restart, and then I'm going to log back in. Most times it only takes a few seconds to restart the server. And let's see if I can get a login. Yes. Okay, cool. And here you can see there's no packages to be updated and no security updates. That's what we want to see. Okay, let's continue. Let's do now that we've got a clean server, let's do the apt-get key. This will allow apt-get to validate the BigBlueButton packages. Let's install the URL for the BigBlueButton packages, and we're going to do one more apt-get update, and we will now see that it will actually be pulling in there. That's the URL for the packages. So it now knows about all the BigBlueButton packages. The next step is to install. Okay. And it's ready to go, so just hit yes. So at this point, it's going to pull down all the packages for BigBlueButton and all the dependencies such as Tomcat, LibreOffice, FFmpeg, Nginx, Redis, Ruby, and a bunch of others. So you don't need to know all of these. You can certainly watch as it installs all the packages. But everything has been set up so that on a server with a single IP address, the installation should go through, and it should use the default IP address to configure BigBlueButton. So we're going to let this run. Okay, here's the acceptance of a EULA for some fonts. I'm just going to click Tab, hit OK, Tab, hit yes. Okay, the BigBlueButton installation is done. Let's go to the next step. Alright, so the install the packages. They're not entirely deterministic, so we're just going to restart the server. This will stop all the BigBlueButton components and then restart them all again in proper order. Okay, and the next it's going to run, we'll run this BBBconf is basically a BigBlueButton configuration utility. It handles a lot of the common operations for the server, starting, stopping, checking for errors, configuration for a host name. So we're going to run this after the server comes back up. Okay. All right, so the server's running. That's the IP address that was given. Let's go next. All right, so the next is to set up a host name for it. So let's go to GoDaddy, and I'm going to manage the DNS for this site. And we have the IP address here. So let's add, now in this case it's going to be an A record, which is a pointer to a host. We'll call the host, simply call the host my, points to this IP address. Okay, let's save it. Alright, that should be pretty quick. So let's do ping my.meetbbb.com. And there it is. So the host name's configured. Let's go back to the steps. And now we can actually use BBBconf to set all the configuration to that host name. Okay, so it will now assign all the configuration files the proper host name, and again we'll do a bbbconf check. And now we see it is in my.meetbbb.com. Okay, and right now what it's actually waiting for is all the components of BigBlueButton to finish starting up. So it's probably waiting for Tomcat to finish powering up. Looks good. No problems shown. So if at this point you wanted to just use BigBlueButton with another learning management system, you could. You can use this command to get the secret out, which is the URL and shared secret. We're not finished with the installation yet. We're going to actually configure this for SSL and install the API demos. The API demos are going to let us actually use the front end. So if I go here to meet my BB right now, that's the server. If I like to log in, I get this 404 error because there is no demo1.jsp. Let's fix that. So I'm going to install the BigBlueButton demos optional. Okay, let's restart Nginx. And now let's go back over here. And if we start, I think Tomcat's still coming up. Now let's go back and let's try joining. Okay, so the API demos actually show lots of examples of how to use BigBlueButton. They're more directed towards developers, but they give you a simple front end which you can go in and use BigBlueButton. So if I try here, configure the microphone, test. Can you hear myself?
You are currently the only person in this conference.
It's working. If I want to just share the webcam, yeah, it's working too. Say hi. And if I want to try desktop sharing, so this is using Java, which I have installed. So I'm just going to share a region of the screen. Do start. I will download a JNLP file. Ask me if I run it. The startup sequence is different depending on browser you're using, an operating system, but Firefox and Windows goes pretty quick. I can drag this around. I can start sharing, and there's a screen which would be visible to remote students. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to log out. Okay, this server is not yet running from SSL or running from HTTPS, so let's go back to the install instructions. We're looking pretty good. There is a self-check that we can actually add to the server, which we're going to do that as well. Clear the screen here. Okay, so this lets us test some configuration of the user's environment and the server's environment. And it actually just goes check. Okay, so this is actually useful to determine if the ports are available, the browser, and actually it's more the ports here, which is pretty much what you want to look for. But again, this server doesn't have any firewall. Okay, let's go back to the install instructions. Okay, so the next step is we're going to set up SSL on the server. And to do that, we're going to need to get an SSL certificate. So what we're going to do is we're going to get one here from Let's Encrypt. So what I will do is you can actually go here to get it started and use certbot, which is how Let's Encrypt can install. And you can say I'm using Nginx on Ubuntu 16.04, and it will tell you to install Let's Encrypt. So we've kind of pulled that stuff into our instructions, so we're going to pick it up here. So I'm going to install Let's Encrypt. Should I clear this again? Okay. And yes. Okay, so next we're going to make this directory, which is already there. That's fine. I did it already in the first steps. And now we're going to run this command to create 248-bit Diffie-Hellman parameters. So this is going to allow us to give the server its own secure identity, which will then be used with a certificate to create an SSL certificate that gets down to the browser, and the users will validate it. As long as it is can be validated against a root certificate in the browser, and that's what Let's Encrypt is going to provide. It's going to provide a certificate that can be validated. Okay, it's done. Let's go back to the next step. Okay, we've already done bbconf.ip, and now we're going to request a certificate for our server. So these warnings are just telling me that the IP address is different from the host name, which is fine. That's what we configured. It's warning that the API demos are installed. That's fine. We want them to check. We want them to use to test the server. And then the check is installed. That's fine too. So let's set up request a certificate. And we'll get one from Let's Encrypt. So use an email address. I'm going to do mine, button.org. Okay, agree with the terms of service. Okay, so it's going to generate a certificate in this file directory. So let's just see if it's there. It is. Okay. And now we're going to modify the Nginx configuration file so it will reference these certificates. So edit the Nginx configuration file for BigBlueButton. Let's do that. Okay. And after this part here, we're going to add these lines. Okay. 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 So we're also going to want to actually have the certificate renewed. So the Let's Encrypt certificate will last for 90 days. Let's just use Phi to do this. And we're going to add 2 entries to the cron tab. Okay, so this will basically every Monday morning at, I believe, 2:30 a.m. it will request a renewal of a certificate. So if the certificate is getting close to expiring, you'll get a new certificate. And then at 2:35 a.m. it will reload Nginx so that it will reload the certificate. Okay. And to finish the SSL configuration, we'll go with configuring FreeSwitch. So we're going to edit this file external.xml. And there's this WebSocket binding here. We're going to bind it on port 7443. Change it here. Okay. Looks good. And now we'll edit SIP Nginx to tell it to redirect. Incoming WebSocket connections with the URL in /WS to port 7443. So we're going to need to do this S. Okay, and then we need to let the WebRTC client know that we're using WSS. And it's editing that file, made it WSS. And if the check is installed, we're going to modify the check page so it will use SSL as well. Okay. And now BigBlueButton itself needs to know that the host name is now HTTPS. So the main host name is in the BigBlueButton.properties file. Edit that, and it is there. HTTPS. And the screen sharing needs to know that it's using HTTPS as well. Okay. That's for the JNLP file. And the config XML file, which gets loaded by the client. Change that to be HTTPS. And lastly, we're going to edit the demo files. So the demo file also has a link back to the BigBlueButton server. And we're going to make this HTTPS. Okay. So let's do a restart of the server. And while it's restarting, we're going to do an SSL test on the server. And we're going to do my meetbbb.com. Just wait for it comes up. Okay, and let's do it. This is really important because if you have a self-signed certificate or a certificate that comes from an issuer that doesn't have root certificates or popular root certificates, you're going to get problems later on. Okay, it's done. And this looks good. So overall rating A, this is what you want to see. All right. So we are actually good to go. So let's go back to our server now. Now we'll do HTTPS my.BigBlueButton.org. We can see we've got a valid certificate. If we look for more information, here it is. It's from Let's Crypt, and it will expire on April 29th. The cron job will make sure it's always renewed. Again, the certificates are good for 90 days. Let's enter. Just joining the meeting. Now we can see that the pages itself are being loaded by HTTPS and the microphone.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
So that's setting up BigBlueButton server. If you want more information, then the links here are at the website. Check out the homepage, and you're welcome to download and set up your own BigBlueButton server. Enjoy.